Filters, man, probably the most popular item on samplers that people look for. You hear the word modulation thrown about all the time. You know, it sounds like this big technical thing, and modulation generally only means to change or to influence. That's it. So in this video, we are going to discuss 3 ways to modulate the filter on your sampler, and hopefully we can influence your creativity and use of the ASR10 so that you could have more fun making music. And of course, what we're speaking about here can be done on any sampler, but in particular, it can be done on the classic EPS and the EPS 16 Plus. Maybe with the exception of one, which we'll get to, but let's get on with things. The first thing we're going to do is go to Edit Filter on your ASR10, and we're going to see about the business of modulating the filter and to what degree we're going to do so. So you'll see a page in that menu called Filter Modulation, and it's short form now to F1 mod and F2 mod. You have 2 available filters, and we're just going to deal with the low pass filter here, the 2 of those. You can use the settings that I'm using, but really you can do whatever you want. Don't follow me, do what you like, okay? So I've put it down to -77 on both the first filter and the second filter. One is a 3-pole filter and one is a 1-pole filter. Second thing, we're going to look at what we're going to use to modulate that filter. So the first one was dealing by the amount, and now we're looking at what we're going to use that's on the ASR10 that we can influence that filter to change. And the first thing is the wheel, mod wheel, okay? So what should happen is when we move the mod wheel while playing a sample, the mod wheel should control the amount of the filter and thus cause the filter to have an effect on the sound. Yeah? Let's hope so. Anyway, let's take a listen. You know, it worked. I told you it would. So the second way, again, very common, very useful, is to use an LFO, a low frequency oscillator, to influence the filter and its effect on our audio source, okay? So same rule apply. We're gonna leave the original filter mod amount alone. We don't need to touch that. We can leave that as is. But what we're going to do is go to the modulation source and change that to LFO. So now our modulation wheel, it's unemployed. It has no more use. It's out of the picture, right? But we got to do some things with the LFO to make sure it behaves correctly. So we'll go to Edit LFO, and you'll see the LFO wave, and we're going to change that to sine wave. And that basically is the LFO pattern that our filter is going to follow. So just like a roller coaster ride, the filter is going to follow the path of a sine wave. Then we got to choose the rate. And the rate is basically how fast the LFO is going to travel along that sine wave. And I've chosen 18. Once again, you could do whatever you want, and you should do whatever you want. 18 ends up being about 0.50 hertz, which is really slow. Next in that same menu, you're going to go to the LFO delay. Now this basically just chooses the time when the LFO actually kicks into action. So you could actually delay it. So let's say you have a sound that you don't want the filter to modulate right away. Like you want to give a little bit of time before the LFO actually kicks in to control the filter. What you can do is you can set a delay. But in this case, I don't want a delay. I want the filter to start modulating right away. So I'm going to leave that at 0. Lastly, I know, bear with me. We're going to choose the LFO depth, and this is going to choose how aggressive or how far that LFO is going to go into the modulation depth that we started all the way back when we started this thing. So that original filter modulation depth, I'm just choosing, it's kind of like a percentage, you know, like how much do you want to get to that -77 point that I chose before, right? If I were to bring this level all the way up to 99, it would go the full way, but I just wanted to go partial, so I'm going to leave it at 80. All right, so we're here now. Let's see what happens. It's cool, right? So this is kind of like an automated filter modulation where instead of us manually doing anything, the LFO is doing the job all by itself. And lastly, and this is the one that you may not be able to do on any generic sampler, because for the most part, this last one is kind of proprietary to Ensoniq products, at least in that time, but you will find it other places. It is called Aftertouch, and more importantly, polyphonic aftertouch, which we'll get into in another video. But for now, aftertouch is the ability for you to influence, i.e. modulate, anything predicated on how hard you press the key once you've already pressed it. So say I press a key, right, and I'm holding it, right? If I push down harder on that key, I could have that pressure amount modulate something. And in this case, we're going to use the filter. So this one's pretty simple. We've done most of the work already. All we got to do is go back to our filter source by pressing edit filter and scroll that source until you see press. It won't say aftertouch, it will say press. And that's what press means in this case. Press stands for pressure. That's what I'm guessing. Let's roll with that, okay? So now let's see how this works as we now listen to our third way to modulate the filter on your Ensoniq ASR10. That's crazy, right? Anyway, thank you for listening. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Find out more about us at thedaydreamsound.com. Take care of yourself, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.